Millionaire, Paralyzed by What a Child Drew. A baby in his arms. What happens when an innocent drawing reveals a secret buried for nearly a decade? Welcome to Millionaire, Paralyzed by What a Child Drew. A baby in his arms. A captivating story about encounters that change destinies. Brian Reed built a financial empire in Manhattan, but lives isolated at the top of his glass tower. His perfect, calculated routine is completely shattered when a young girl drops a drawing at his feet during a walk in Central Park. The drawing shows Brian holding a baby he's never met. Even more disturbing, the child knows his name without ever having been introduced to him. What began as a casual encounter transforms into an emotional journey connecting past and present, revealing that some truths cannot be ignored, no matter how much money or power you possess. Follow this 4-chapter story about second chances, mysterious connections, and the discovery that the greatest fortune may not be in bank accounts, but in the bonds we form with others. A completely realistic story that will touch your heart and make you reflect on what truly matters in life. In New York City, where fortunes are made and lost with a keystroke, some men stand above the rest. Brian Reed was one of them. The morning light reflected off the glass skyscrapers as people rushed to work in the bustling business district of Manhattan. On the 55th floor of Reed Enterprises, Brian Reed stood at the window of his sleek, modern office, phone pressed to his ear, Central Park sprawling below him. At 48, he cut an imposing figure in his tailored charcoal suit, his stern expression rarely softening, even in moments of victory. "I don't care what they're offering. We're not selling, not at that price point," he said firmly into the phone. After a pause, he added, "Then make them understand. That's what I pay you for." He hung up as his assistant entered, a professional woman in her 30s who had mastered the art of managing her demanding boss. "Mr. Reed, your 9:30 is here, and Chicago is still waiting for confirmation on the Henderson acquisition," she informed him. Brian adjusted his tie in the reflection of a glass award case filled with business achievements. "Tell Chicago we're proceeding as discussed. Nothing's changed." Brian Reed had built Reed Enterprises from the ground up, transforming a small investment firm into a billion-dollar empire. Business magazines called him the Oracle of Manhattan for his uncanny ability to predict market shifts. But behind every oracle is a man, and Brian Reed was a man who lived alone. His penthouse apartment reflected this solitude: minimalist luxury, expensive art, spotless surfaces, but no personal photos. That evening, as he entered his home, he placed his keys in a small dish with practiced precision. The space was immaculate but sterile. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat in silence, watching the city lights twinkle outside his window. His routine rarely varied: work, home, sleep, rinse and repeat. The empire required maintenance, and Brian had long ago decided that personal entanglements were inefficient. His one concession to leisure was his weekend walk through Central Park. Not for enjoyment, he would say if asked, but for clarity of thought. On this particular spring morning, the park was alive with families and joggers enjoying the sunshine. Brian, dressed in casual but expensive clothing, walked briskly along the path, his mind occupied with business strategies and market forecasts. As Brian walked, a young girl sat on a nearby bench with a sketchbook and colored pencils. She was about 8 years old with curly hair, wearing a yellow dress. This was Lily, a woman in her 30s with a warm smile and casual dress, watched Lily while reading a book. This was Claire, Lily's mother. Brian passed them without noticing, focused on his thoughts. Suddenly, a gust of wind caught one of Lily's drawings, sending it flying. "My drawing!" Lily gasped, distressed. The paper tumbled along the path, landing at Brian's feet. He paused, looked down, and picked it up, about to hand it back without looking. Lily ran up to him. "Thank you, mister. That's my special one." Brian glanced at the drawing, and froze. It was a surprisingly well-drawn sketch of Brian himself holding a baby. The details of his face were unmistakable, down to the small scar above his right eyebrow. "What is this?" Brian asked, disturbed. "Why did you draw this?" Lily looked confused. "I draw what I see." Claire approached quickly. "Lily, don't bother the gentleman," she said, then turned to Brian. "I'm sorry, she's very friendly." Brian stared at Claire, then back at the drawing. "Did you put her up to this? Who are you people?" "Excuse me," Claire replied, confused. Brian held up the drawing. This picture of me with a..." He couldn't even say it. Claire looked at the drawing, genuinely surprised. "I'm sorry. I don't understand. Lily draws all kinds of things. She has a vivid imagination." "But I don't imagine," Lily said innocently. "I remember." Brian's face paled. "Remember what?" Lily started to speak, but Claire interrupted. "We should go. I'm sorry if she bothered you." Claire took Lily's hand and the drawing, casting one last, confused look at Brian. As they walked away, Brian stood frozen, watching them go. "Bye, Mr. Reed," Lily called, looking back and waving. Brian's eyes widened. He had never told them his name. Some moments change everything. For Brian Reed, it wasn't a market crash or business deal that would alter his carefully constructed life. It was a piece of paper and the innocent words of a child he'd never met. That night in his penthouse, Brian paced, agitated, pouring another drink. He stopped at his laptop, opened it, and typed quickly, searching for children who claim to remember things and psychological explanations for children's premonitions. His phone rang. It was his assistant. "What is it?" he answered. "Sorry to disturb you, sir. The Tokyo markets opened unexpectedly strong. Should we adjust our position?" "What? No. Stick to the plan," Brian replied, distracted, and hung up. He returned to the computer, then stopped and rubbed his temples. "This is absurd," he muttered to himself. "It's a coincidence, nothing more." He closed the laptop decisively, but his expression revealed he didn't believe his own words. For a man who built his fortune on calculated decisions, Brian Reed was now facing a variable he couldn't quantify. And despite every rational argument, he couldn't shake the image from his mind. Himself, holding a child he'd never met, drawn by a girl who somehow knew his name. Brian looked tired and distracted during a board meeting the next morning at Reed Enterprises. As the discussion about the Singapore expansion concluded, everyone turned to Brian for final approval. "So, we're agreed on the Singapore expansion?" asked one of the board members. Brian was staring out the window, his mind elsewhere. "Mr. Reed," the board member prompted. "Yes," Brian said, snapping back to attention. "Proceed as discussed. Is there anything else?" The board members exchanged glances before concluding the meeting. Everyone filed out except Brian's CFO, Michael, a man in his 50s who had been with Brian since the early days. "Are you all right, Brian?" Michael asked, concerned. "You seem distracted." "I'm fine. Just considering some personal matters." Michael couldn't hide his surprise. "Personal? That's a first." Brian gave him a look and Michael backed off. "Sorry, you know you can talk to me if you need to." "There's nothing to talk about," Brian insisted. After Michael left, Brian called in his assistant. "I need you to find someone, a woman and her daughter about 8 years old. First name Lily. They were in Central Park this weekend, near the Bethesda fountain." His assistant looked confused. "Do you have a last name?" "If I had a last name, I would have given it to you," Brian replied, irritated. "Of course. I'll see what I can do." That evening, his assistant returned with a file. "Sir, I've narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. Lily Chen, whose mother Claire is a book editor, Lily Martinez, whose mother Rosa is a nurse, and Lily Thompson, whose mother Sarah is an art teacher." Brian took the file and studied it carefully. "This one, the editor. Where do they live?" "Sir, I'm not sure I should." His assistant hesitated. "This is important," Brian cut her off. "Brooklyn Heights," she reluctantly shared. "There's an address in the file." The next day, Brian stood across the street from a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, watching the building. He saw Claire exit with Lily, who was wearing a backpack. He followed at a distance as they walked to a nearby elementary school. At the school gate, Claire kissed Lily goodbye. "Have a good day, sweetheart. Mrs. Jensen is picking you up for your play date, remember?" Lily nodded and ran inside. Claire walked away, and Brian approached her. "Excuse me, Claire, right?" Claire turned, recognized him, and looked surprised. "You're the man from the park. Brian Reed. I'd like to talk to you about your daughter." Claire immediately became defensive. "What about her?" "Her drawing. The one of me." "How did you find us?" Claire asked warily. "That's not important." "Actually, it's extremely important. You followed us. I need to understand how she knew who I was," Brian insisted. "Stay away from my daughter, Mr. Reed," Claire said firmly. "I don't know what you want, but this is inappropriate." She walked away quickly. "I just want to talk," Brian called after her, but Claire didn't look back. Later that morning, Brian sat in a coffee shop with his laptop, searching Claire's name. He found her social media profiles and professional information. His phone rang. It was Michael. "Where are you?" Michael asked. "The Westbrook meeting started 10 minutes ago." "Reschedule it," Brian replied, distracted. "Brian, what's going on? This isn't like you." "Just handle it, Michael." He hung up and continued searching. Claire's professional page mentioned she was editing a book launch event that evening at a local bookstore. That evening, Brian stood outside an independent bookstore in Brooklyn, watching through the window as Claire helped arrange chairs. He entered and approached a bookstore employee. "The event tonight, is it open to the public?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Starting at 7, the employee replied. Brian nodded, looking at Claire, who hadn't noticed him yet. After the reading finished, people mingled, drinking wine from plastic cups. Brian approached Claire, who looked up from her conversation and froze. "You again. Are you following me?" she asked. "I saw the event posting online." "Public event," Brian replied. "What do you want?" 5 minutes, that's all." Claire considered, then nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes. They moved to a quieter corner of the bookstore. "Your daughter's drawing. It wasn't random, was it?" Brian asked. "Lily has a vivid imagination," Claire answered guardedly. "She knew my name without being told." Claire's expression flickered. This was news to her. "What?" "She called me Mr. Reed as you were leaving. I never introduced myself." Claire looked troubled. "That's strange. But children pick things up. Maybe she heard it somewhere." "And the drawing? Me holding a baby? What does that mean?" "I don't know," Claire said, frustrated. "Lily draws what interests her. She's always been intuitive." "I need to talk to her." "Absolutely not. Please." "This is important to me," Brian insisted. "You're a stranger who's now tracked us down twice. Do you have any idea how inappropriate this is?" "I understand how it looks." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a powerful man harassing a single mother and her child over a drawing." Brian was silent, realizing how it appeared. "You should go," Claire said. Brian took out a business card and placed it on the table. "If you change your mind, or if she says anything else about me." Claire didn't take the card, but didn't refuse it either. "I'm not trying to frighten you," Brian added. "I just need answers." He left, with Claire watching him go, her expression troubled. That night, Brian stared at a glass of whiskey in his penthouse, not drinking it. His phone buzzed with work messages that he ignored. He opened his laptop and typed, "Children who remember past lives," into the search bar. Hours later, he was still reading, surrounded by open books about reincarnation theories and childhood psychology. Brian Reed had built his reputation on finding patterns where others saw chaos. Now he was searching for a pattern to explain something that defied rational explanation. What he didn't realize was that his search for answers about the girl would become a journey into his own past. A past he had carefully locked away. The next morning, Brian exited his car and approached the Reed Enterprises building. Michael waited at the entrance, clearly concerned. 2 missed board meetings, 18 unanswered calls. "What's going on?" Michael demanded. "I needed time to think," Brian replied. "About what?" "The company's in the middle of 3 major acquisitions. I'm aware of my responsibilities." In Brian's office, Michael sat across from him. "I've known you for 20 years. Something's going on." Brian was silent for a moment, then asked, "Do you remember Boston?" Boston? Michael was confused by the change of subject. "Before Reed Enterprises, when I was working for Wentworth Capital." "Sure, that's where you made your first million, the tech startup gamble." "I wasn't alone in Boston," Brian said quietly. "You never talk about your personal life from back then," Michael noted carefully. "There was someone, Rebecca." Michael's surprise was evident. This was new information. "A relationship? You?" Brian ignored the jab. "It ended badly, very badly." "How badly?" "She was pregnant when I left." Michael sat back, stunned. "Jesus, Brian, you have a child." Brian shook his head. "I don't know. She refused all contact after I left, changed her number, moved apartments. It was clear she wanted nothing to do with me. And you just let it go. It was for the best. I wasn't father material. I had a company to build." Michael studied his friend with new eyes. "Why are you telling me this now?" Brian didn't answer directly. "Can you run some searches for me?" "Discreetly. Rebecca Collins, last known residence Boston, approximately 9 years ago." "This is what's been distracting you. You're looking for her. Will you help me or not?" "Of course I will," Michael sighed. "But Brian, what do you expect to find?" "I don't know." "Answers, maybe?" That evening, Claire sat at her kitchen table looking at Brian's business card. Lily sat at the counter drawing. "Lily, remember that man in the park? The one who picked up your drawing?" Claire asked carefully. "Mr. Reed. He has sad eyes," Lily replied without looking up. "How did you know his name, sweetie?" Lily shrugged. "I just knew." "And the baby in your drawing, why did you draw him holding a baby?" "Because he's supposed to," Lily said matter-of-factly. Claire looked troubled. "What do you mean?" Lily looked up now. "He forgot something important. I'm helping him remember." Claire stared at her daughter, unsettled by her words. Later that night, Brian's phone rang. It was Michael. "Did you find her?" Brian answered. "Not exactly," Michael replied. "Rebecca Collins died, Brian. Car accident 7 years ago." Brian sank into a chair. "The child?" Michael hesitated. "There was a daughter, Eleanor Collins, born 8 months. After you left Boston, the timeline matches." "What happened to her?" Brian asked quietly. "Went into the foster system after Rebecca died. The records get complicated there. I'm still looking." Brian was silent. "Brian, are you okay?" "Keep searching. I need to know what happened to her." He hung up just as his doorbell rang. Brian opened the door to find Claire standing there. "How did you find my address?" he asked, surprised. "Your business card has your name. You're not exactly hard to locate." He gestured for her to enter. Claire looked around at the luxurious but sterile penthouse. "Lily said something that disturbed me." "About you," she began. "What?" "She said she's helping you remember something important." Brian's expression shifted. "I know this sounds crazy, but this isn't the first time Lily has known things she shouldn't. Details about people, places we've never been." "What are you saying?" Brian asked carefully. "I'm not saying anything. I've learned to pay attention when these things happen." She pulled out her phone and showed him photos of Lily's drawings. "She draws scenes, people. Sometimes they turn out to be real." Brian studied the images. "I need to tell you something." He gestured to the couch and they sat. 9 years ago, I was in a relationship with a woman named Rebecca Collins in Boston. She was pregnant when I left. I never saw the child. Claire listened, her expression unreadable. I just found out Rebecca died in an accident 7 years ago. The child, a daughter, went into foster care. And you think, what? That Lily somehow knows about this? Claire asked, putting it together. I don't know what to think. Did you adopt Lily? What? No, Claire said defensively. I gave birth to Lily. I have the stretch marks to prove it. Then I don't understand. Neither do I. But I know my daughter. And when she gets like this, focused on someone, there's usually a reason. She stood. Lily wants to meet you properly. Against my better judgment, I'm willing to let that happen. One meeting in public with me present. Thank you, Brian said sincerely. Don't thank me yet. This whole situation is bizarre, but if it will help my daughter make sense of whatever she's experiencing, I'll try anything. She wrote her number on a notepad. Call tomorrow. We can arrange something. As she reached the door, Brian asked, Why are you doing this? Claire paused. Because 7 years ago, Lily started talking about a man she called her other daddy. I assumed it was imagination. Now I'm not so sure. Claire left, leaving Brian stunned by her revelation. Late that night, Brian sat on the edge of his bed, looking at an old photograph of himself with a woman, both smiling, Rebecca. His phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Found something. Foster records show Eleanor Collins was adopted by a family in New York State 6 years ago, working on more details. Brian stared at the message, then back at the photo. They say the past catches up to everyone eventually. For Brian Reed, it was catching up through the innocent drawings of a child who could not possibly know what she knew. As morning approached, he faced a question he had never allowed himself to ask. What if the empire he had built was nothing more than a fortress to hide from the life he had abandoned? The afternoon sun cast golden light across Central Park as Brian sat on a bench near the Bethesda fountain, checking his watch nervously. Claire approached with Lily, who carried her sketchbook. Brian stood as they arrived. Thank you for coming, he said formally. This is Mr. Reed. You remember him from the park, Claire said to Lily. Lily nodded, studying Brian with unusual intensity for a child. Your tie is crooked. Brian glanced down and adjusted his tie. I hear you're quite the artist. Lily, he said, attempting warmth. Lily opened her sketchbook and flipped through the pages. Do you want to see? Brian sat on the bench with Lily beside him, Claire standing protectively nearby. Lily showed him drawings, ordinary childlike scenes, then suddenly more detailed images. She stopped at a drawing of a woman smiling. It resembled the photo of Rebecca. Who is this? Brian asked, shocked. The sad lady. She's not sad anymore, though, Lily replied simply. Brian glanced at Claire, who looked concerned. And how do you know about the sad lady? Brian asked Lily. She showed me. In my dreams. Brian was at a loss for words. And the baby? In the drawing. Of me? Lily turned to a new page, a more detailed drawing of a girl about Lily's age. She got lost, but she's not lost anymore. Brian's phone rang. It was Michael. I need to take this, he told Claire, stepping away a few feet. What have you found? He asked into the phone. Eleanor Collins was adopted by Thomas and Claire Peterson. They changed her name to Lily, Michael informed him. Brian nearly dropped the phone and turned to look at Claire and Lily. There's more, Michael continued. Claire Peterson was Rebecca's roommate in college. They stayed close. When Rebecca died, Claire adopted the girl. Thank you, Michael, Brian said weakly, and ended the call. He walked back to the bench. Claire recognized his expression. What is it? She asked. Eleanor Collins, Rebecca's daughter. You adopted her, Brian said directly. Claire paled. How did you... Does she know? About me? She knows Rebecca was her birth mother. I've never hidden that, Claire said defensively. But no, she doesn't know about you. Rebecca never even told me who the father was. Brian looked at Lily, who continued drawing, seemingly oblivious but clearly listening. "Yet somehow she knows," he said softly. "This is impossible." "A coincidence," Claire said, lowering her voice. "Is it? You said yourself, she knows things she shouldn't." Lily looked up. "I'm drawing your new house." Both adults looked at her. "My house?" Brian asked. "The one with the tree swing and the yellow door?" Lily nodded. Brian and Claire exchanged looks. "I think we need to talk." "Privately," Claire suggested to Brian, who nodded in agreement. Later, at a cafe near the park, Lily sat at a nearby table drawing, while Brian and Claire talked in low voices. "I never expected to meet Rebecca's ex. She never even told me your name," Claire admitted. "She hated me for leaving." "I don't blame her," Brian said. "She didn't hate you. She was disappointed." Brian absorbed this quietly. "After the accident, there was no one else. Her parents were gone. I couldn't let Lily go to strangers." "You've raised her well," Brian observed. "I'm her mother in every way that matters," Claire said defensively. "I'm not disputing that." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. "These things she knows. Has this happened before?" Brian finally asked. "Yes," Claire hesitated. "Small things usually. Knowing about a place before we visit. Drawing people she's never met. The doctors call it highly intuitive." "And you? What do you think?" "I think there are things in this world we don't understand," Claire said after a pause. "And Lily experiences them differently than most people." Brian looked over at Lily, who was focused on her drawing. "What happens now?" he asked. "That depends on what you want." "I don't know. I never thought I'd have a child. I deliberately built a life that had no room for one. Then maybe nothing changes. She's happy, loved. But she sought me out," Brian said quietly. "That drawing, it wasn't an accident." Claire followed his gaze to Lily. "No, I don't think it was." Outside the cafe, Brian, Claire and Lily stood together. "It was nice meeting you properly, Lily," Brian said awkwardly. Lily handed him a folded paper. "This is for you." Brian opened it, a drawing of a house with a yellow door and a tree with a swing. "See? You're not alone in this one," Lily said, pointing at the drawing. In the drawing, 3 figures stood in front of the house: a man, a woman, and a child. "Thank you," Brian said, his voice tight with emotion. Claire put her hand on Lily's shoulder. "We should go." Brian reached into his pocket and handed Claire his card. "My personal number is on the back. If it's all right, I'd like to talk again." Claire took the card and nodded. "I think that would be okay." As they walked away, Lily turned and waved. "Bye, Dad." Brian froze, emotion washing over his usually stoic face. Days later, Brian was meeting with the board at his office. "The Singapore expansion will proceed, but I'm making some changes to our timeline," he announced. "Changes? We've been planning this for months," a board member said, concerned. "Yes, and now I'm adjusting those plans. I'll be scaling back my day-to-day involvement with the acquisition." Surprise spread around the table. "May I ask why?" Michael asked carefully. "Personal reasons," Brian replied. There was more surprise. Brian Reed and personal reasons didn't go together. "Michael will oversee the transition. He has my complete confidence." After the meeting, Michael approached Brian. "Personal reasons? That's a first. I've found my daughter, Michael, or rather she found me." "That's incredible," Michael said, genuinely happy. "What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet, but I need to make space to figure it out." Brian looked out the window, the city sprawling below. "I spent 9 years building this company instead of knowing my daughter." "You can't change the past, Brian." "No, but I can change what happens next." That weekend, Brian pulled up in front of a modest but charming house in a suburban street. He carried a small wrapped package. The front door was painted yellow. Claire opened the door and smiled tentatively. You came. I said I would, Brian replied. From inside, Lily's voice called out excitedly, "Is that him? Did he come?" Lily appeared in the doorway beaming. "I knew you would. Did you see? We painted the door yellow, just like in my drawing." Brian looked at the door, then at the wrapped package in his hands. "I brought something for the tree in the backyard." He handed the package to Lily, who unwrapped it eagerly. It was a tree swing kit. "It's perfect," Lily exclaimed, thrilled. "Can we put it up now?" Claire and Brian exchanged a look, tentative, hopeful. "Why don't you come in first?" Claire suggested. "I made coffee." Brian nodded and stepped inside. "And after the swing, I can show you all my drawings," Lily said, taking his hand naturally. "I have so many to show you." Brian allowed himself to be led inside, his expression softening. The newly hung swing moved gently in the breeze later that afternoon. Through the window, Brian, Claire and Lily could be seen at the kitchen table looking at drawings, talking, the beginning of whatever comes next. Brian Reed had spent his life calculating risks and returns. He had built an empire by predicting outcomes and controlling variables. But the greatest journey of his life began with something he could never have predicted, a child's drawing of a future he never knew he wanted, but somehow, deep down, had always been searching for. End. Did this story touch your heart? I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Share them with me in the comments below, and don't forget to tell me where in the world you're watching from. It's always inspiring to see how far these stories reach and to connect with viewers from all over the globe. Leave your city, country, or even just a flag emoji in the comments. Let's come together through the magic of storytelling.